മുതൽ കാത്തിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സെഷനാണ് ഈ മീഡിയ സെഷൻ. ഇതിൻ്റെ ഉദ്ഘാടനം നിർവഹിക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി ബഹുമാന്യനായ ശ്രീ ശശികുമാറിനെ ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു.
Friends, ഫാഷിസത്തിന്റെ കാലത്ത് മാധ്യമപ്രവർത്തനം എന്ന വിഷയം നമുക്ക് വളരെ പ്രാധാന്യമുള്ളൊരു വിഷയമാണ്. ഞാൻ ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് എൻ്റെ ചിന്തകൾ പറഞ്ഞു വരുമ്പോൾ മിക്കവാറും ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലായി പോവും. അതിനൊരു മുൻകൂർ ജാമ്യം മാപ്പുപെടുത്താൻ, കാരണം എനിക്ക് പൊതുവേദിയിൽ പ്രയോഗിക്കാവുന്ന മലയാളമൊന്നും എൻ്റെ കൈവശമില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ടും ഉദ്ദേശമൊന്നും അങ്ങനെ കൃത്യമായി മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയാൻ പറ്റാത്തതുകൊണ്ടും. When we look at the subject of fascism and the media, what will traditionally occur to us, what will strike us at first is the problem that fascism faces or poses for the media. How can media negotiate an era of fascism or proto-fascism? Fascism is a problematic term because even a section of the left, including the CPM leadership, is of the opinion that it is premature to call what we see before us fascism, or it may not be a correct representation. I am not getting into that hair splitting about what theoretically constitutes fascism or not, because it is enough for a people to recognize the symptoms of fascism, the experience of fascism, the totalitarian nature of fascism, the intolerance of fascism, and call it fascism. Fascism by any other name is fascism. You can only call a spade a spade. You can call it a shovel if you like. You can call it an instrument to pick up earth if you like. But ultimately a spade is a spade, and so fascism is fascism. So let me get that alibi out of the way. I firmly recognize that what is happening around us is, if not full-blown fascism, proto-fascism, has all the makings of fascism. Fascism, of course, is also contextual, both in time and place. We need not replicate fascism as was experienced in Italy or in Germany or even in Japan at a period of time. Our experience of fascism can be different. Even in the extreme left, the Pol Pot regime was characterized as fascist. So fascism has certain symptomatic expressions, and when we see those expressions, and when they stare us in the face, when they breathe down our neck, we must first of all be prepared to recognize it as fascism. I think that is the first step. With respect to the theme of media and fascism, as I said, there are two aspects to the problem. One is, how does media negotiate fascism? How can media counter fascism? How can media become a escape route against fascism? And the other is, how does media compound fascism? How does media contribute to fascism? How does media feed into fascism? And how does media itself become an expression of fascism? I leave it to all of you who are experiencing media day in and day out to arrive at your own conclusions about where we are at in terms of our contemporary media experience. Is the media that we consume every day, that we read and write, hear and see and experience every day, a vehicle of fascism? Or is it a clever, combative agency against fascism? So I'm going to suggest that we have a mix of both in the media, and that is the peculiar nature of the Indian experience or the Indian situation today. What we have in terms of the government that is ruling at the center today and increasingly appropriating state after state, both through the electoral route and extra-constitutional means, browbeating the democratic process, is a form of authoritarianism, of totalitarianism, of exclusion rather than inclusion, of definition of cultural nationalism, territorial nationalism, religious nationalism, and this combination of the cultural, territorial and religious nationalism is peculiarly Indian in some ways, and that is what is being given expression to today. These are expressions, these are thoughts which have been expressed, enunciated, argued very logically and cogently in his own way by Savarkar, who is a historian, who is a thinker, and who is the inspiration for the ideology, if you like, of the RSS and the BJP that we are experiencing today. And in Savarkar's thinking, there was no mistaking what fascism, what the role of the right of the RSS in India particularly should be. It should be exclusively Hindu in terms of Hindutva, which excluded even other proto-Hindu forms. No Buddhism there, no Jainism there, no Sikhism there, no Parsis there. And of course, the frontal, the main enemy, the main exclusion is for the biggest minority in India, which is the Muslim population. He's consistently argued for that and built an entire theory around it about the 700-year-long Islamic rule and liberation from that. Although at one period in time, in the context of the 1857 mutiny, he concedes that Hindus and Muslims must stand together against and fight that cause against the British. That was the only exception he made, where he recognized the titular leadership of Bahadur Shah Zafar in the context of the 1857 mutiny. Other than that, it has been a very narrow-minded, very focused, anti-Muslim, and it's territorial. The fascism that we are seeing today is territorial. Therefore, anything outside of India is an enemy of India. Which is why we have made such great friends of even China and Pakistan and other neighbors. So this is the agenda. One would have thought that the role of the media in a secular democracy not because you and I like it, because that is what the Constitution stipulates, that India will be a sovereign, democratic, secular, socialist democracy. It says so in the preamble of the Constitution. One would have thought that the media owes allegiance to anything apart from freedom of speech and expression to the guidelines of the Constitution. But increasingly we are seeing a section of the media, and sometimes a dominant section of the media, a powerful section of the media, an influential section of the media, namely the English language media, the television channels, which are becoming apologists, which are becoming sometimes champions, which are becoming like town criers, heralding this form of a new poisonous, divisive politics that has come in with the BJP RSS rule. And whether with their knowledge or unknown to them, unwittingly, the media has become the front guard, what you call the hounds. When hunters go to hound, they will send the hounds up front to go and capture their, and find out where the rabbit or the deer is, so that they can shoot them. The media have performing the role of these front hounds. Any trial balloon about how far you can push your luck in terms of being intolerant, in terms of baiting the minorities, in terms of propagating and pursuing your narrow agenda, is willingly taken up by the media and put out there. We have reached a situation, particularly with some of the major English language news channels, where in a news debate, in a 1-hour news debate that you see every evening, all of them discuss the same thing. The spokesperson of the BJP or the RSS is totally redundant. There is no need for the spokesperson of the BJP or the RSS, because the anchor is already their spokesperson. And the role of the anchor is to make sure that whatever the BJP and the RSS spokesperson says is, first of all, not disturbed by anybody interfering, and secondly, is not challenged in a substantial way. If it is challenged, the anchor then lends his or her own weight to make sure that what they are saying carries the day or carries the show. So this blatant bias, this blatant capitulation to the political dominance of this brand, this vicious brand of politics, is something which was, for me personally, very unexpected in the media, because I thought journalism is made of better stuff. I am brought up in the conviction that it is the dharma of journalism. It is a bounden duty of a journalist worth his salt to be adversarial to the powers that be, to talk truth to power, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. It is not the job of a journalist in a true democracy, which speaks about free speech and expression, to become a propaganda tool, a cat's paw of either the government, and particularly of an ideology which espouses a dangerous, divisive future for us. So a good part of the media has capitulated, has tilted, has literally collapsed. There is a small section of the media at the other side, but before that, the mainstream media, what you call the Mukyadhara Madhyamangal, the mainstream press, the big press, they are resorting to a more subtle form of response to the current situation. In the name of balance, in the name of not offending the sensibility of the viewer, in the name of respecting the dignity of the viewer and so on, they resort to suppressing a lot of news. And selective leaking of news becomes even more dangerous. They do this saying, we are doing this to protect the democratic institutions, to make sure that the dignity of our parliament, of our courts, of the process of democracy, the grand march of democracy is not scandalized. I'll give you a latest example. Look at the speech that the Vice President of India, Mr. Hamid Ansari, made, and look at the reaction to his speech by both the Prime Minister and the new Vice President, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu. Mr. Hamid Ansari referred in his speech to the sense of insecurity that the minorities suffer in this country, as if that is something new. We all know about it. It's something staring us in our face. So he made a mention of it in his farewell speech, literally. In response to that, what does the Prime Minister do? he makes what he thinks is a very subtle attack on the character of Mr. Hamid Ansari. He says you are a diplomat who are used to working in certain stations in West Asia. So, in other words, suggesting that your views are molded by your experience of where you lived. After that, you have worked in Aligarh Muslim University. After that, he's saying all this as if he's praising him, but in fact, caricaturing him as a person who is representing only a particular part of India or a particular religion of India. And then he concludes by saying, so you must have had several thoughts that you wanted to express because of your experience and exposure to your work areas as a career diplomat in West Asian capitals. As a career diplomat, Hamid Ansari worked there. When you came back and you worked in the Minorities Commission, and then you worked in Aligarh Muslim University. So all of these must have molded your thoughts, and as Vice President you would have found it difficult to express these thoughts while you are in that constitutional office. Now that you are relieved of that office, you can speak your mind freely. He's giving him his permission. Now you can go ahead and talk about what you feel like it. Is this a way to characterize the Vice President of the country? But I'm sure none of you knows all of this. Why? Because the media did not report all of this. The mainstream media, the so-called national newspapers, the legacy media, the newspapers of record, did a wonderful editing. They glossed over. They said, Hamid Ansari spoke about the insecurity of minorities. And the Prime Minister said, now that Prime Minister paid tributes to Hamid Ansari's record in office and said that now that you are leaving the office, you won't have the restraint of office to express your opinions. You can express all your opinions freely. What he said in between was the news. Professionally, that was the news. And politically, very significant, dangerously significant, which showed what his mindset was and what the mindset of that whole ideology is. The media, of course, reported more fairly and squarely what Venkaiah Naidu said, because Venkaiah Naidu speaks in rhymes. I think when he learned English, he learned nursery rhymes, and ever since he's been speaking only in couplets and rhymes. So he said that he refuted that there is any such problem among minorities, any insecurity among minorities, which is fair enough, and the media reported it. That Hamid Ansari's first speech in Parliament, first speech after he became Vice President, as reported also, is again a rhyme. He said the opposition must have its say, but the government must have its way. This is how he talks. The opposition must have its way, but the government must have its way. But what happens if when the government has its way, the opposition cannot have its say? That is a problem here. You have a government, if they have their say, there will be no opposition voice possible. There will be opposition reported. And what is reported will be of the nature that I told you. So there is a process of glossing over, of silence by the mainstream responsible media, including, I'm not talking about news channels, which are really the worst examples to cite in journalism today. I'm talking about the mainstream influential national dailies. The way none of them, to my mind, has reported this entire speech of Modi, of Prime Minister Modi. Why? Because they think it's important for the media to make the cosmetic adjustment to enhance the office of the Prime Minister, enhance the office of the President, the Vice President, the Constitution, the Parliament. First of all, that is not the media's function. And secondly, that is hypocrisy, if they think like that. Yevtushenko, the Russian poet, famously said, when truth is replaced by silence, when truth is replaced by silence, that silence is a lie. By being silent, you don't think you are being truthful, or you're escaping speaking the truth. If you are silent when you should speak, you are a liar. It's not only when you speak a lie that you are a liar. I think this is very important, especially as far as the media are concerned, when they are supposed to report, supposed to keep the people informed. We have a Right to Information Act in this country, which is a great act, whereby any citizen can go to any office of power and get information on some injustice or some perceived injustice, get the facts of a case, with very few exceptions. Similarly, if you have a right to, the people have a right to information, the people also have a right to information by the media. That is why they have given media the constitutional and moral high ground. And if the media escape that responsibility, if they dodge that responsibility, or if they lie, barefaced lie, while handling that responsibility, what do you call such a media? So I'm just giving you a latest examples. There are numerous such examples in recent times, in recent years, ever since 2014, and even in the lead up to that, if you like, where the media has been repeatedly committing sins of commission and omission. And whether it is a sin of commission or omission, it doesn't make much of a difference. Whether you are stating something or keeping silent about something, you are being equally untruthful. If truth is replaced by silence, that silence is a lie. So that is one characteristic of the media in the age of fascism that we see. It is not that all media has capitulated. Unfortunately, it is so-called lesser media, the most struggling media, the newer media, if you like, the online portals, some of them, which are actually telling us things as they are and as they ought to be, which have a vantage point of secular democracy, of progressiveness, of humaneness, of equity, of justice. If you don't have these as your core values, as your cardinal principles, what is the difference between being a journalist and being in any other profession? I mean, any other lesser profession, shall we say. Why do you call journalism a noble profession? A democratic agency with special privileges, not special rights, special privileges. As you know, in the Indian Constitution, in the Indian context, a journalist does not have any constitutional rights which are not the rights of any other citizen. There are no special rights that are given to a journalist in India. Unlike in other constitutions. In the United States, for example, a journalist has rights which are prescribed in the Constitution, which are endowed to him by virtue of the Constitution. Because the Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment to that Constitution says, Congress shall make no laws which abridge the freedom of the press. It is laid down. That is why you have a combative, a difficult, a different press in the United States. It is true that Donald Trump came to power, just like Modi did, through an electoral process. It is also true that although Donald Trump became the President of the United States, when you look at the numbers, Hillary Clinton polled 3 million votes more than him. And yet, Donald Trump is the President of the United States. Because of the peculiar nature of that election, of the presidential form of election. But it is also true that in the lead up to the election, 2,000 newspapers and media in the United States, television channels, newspapers, online channels, online portals, were against Donald Trump as president. They wrote editorials against his becoming the president. They took sides. They took a position. They said this man is dangerous because his views on the world are dangerous. He is narrow, he is sectarian, he is racist, he is bigoted. And therefore they took a position saying he is dangerous to a democracy and dangerous to the United States of America. Only about 200 news channels led by Fox News were supporting Donald Trump. And yet, as we know, in the election, Donald Trump eventually became president. But what does the media do in the United States? They don't cross over just because he became the president. They continue to attack him. The major newspapers, the major channels who were attacking him while he was in the campaign to be the president, continue to attack him for the same reasons. Because the reasons have not changed. The dangers have not changed. The dangers have only become worse. The dangers that led them to run the campaign against Donald Trump have not changed. That is a threat to democracy, that is a threat to the people of the United States themselves. Now he's engaged in a childlike bully war with the leader of North Korea, who is a kid literally. So, but the character of the newspapers, of the channels is the print in the United States, because they have this power derived by the Constitution, that nobody can send them to jail, nobody can act against them, because it is a constitutional right. They are able to take the, and of course there's a long history of, they have a far more long history of independent press than we do, from the 18th century onwards. So that enables them to summon the courage to protect the liberty of the press, to protect the democratic rights of the people. And they continue every day, they are attacking the President of the United States. So much so that the first thing the President of the United States does when he gets up in the morning is tweet fake news 3 times. Only then I think his day begins. It's like some mantra for him in the morning. He's so angry with the press, he's so fed up of the press. Look at the Indian situation. So, somebody becoming the Prime Minister, being elected to power is not the be-all and end-all of anything. Hitler was elected to power. He did not come to power through a military coup. The people of Germany elected him to power. That does not make him non-fascist, that does not make him less dangerous, that made him more dangerous. That made him a threat to the entire world. So when something which goes against the grain of democracy, against the grain of humaneness, against the grain of equity, against the grain of anything we consider decent, honest, which gives you minimum dignity as a human being, as a citizen of this country, when that is happening day in and day out, when people are being dragged out of their houses and killed because of the suspicion, not even established fact, and later it proves that they did not, because they consumed beef or kept beef in their fridge, or because they are carrying some cows which you think they are carrying for slaughter. When you have slaughter of a minority community with impunity, when